Hey kids, I'm standing outside the balcony of our church in downtown Portland, and I'm actually standing right beneath the church's bell tower. You know the bell tower, right? That's that big stone pillar-like object with the white top that you see as you go into church every Sunday. And well, you may be more familiar with this bell tower than I am, and you may know that the ropes that are hanging down right here are used on Sunday mornings and other times to ring the bell that's way up in that tower. Now, you see some other wires sticking out, and that's because the staff decided that we wanted to hang Christmas lights up there in addition to having the bell ringing on Christmas. And so they strung power cords up there, and well, I'm going to take you up there in just a moment, let you look around. But before we do, I want to note that at the base, at the very end of the rope here, are a bunch of smaller ropes with tags on them, and these are prayers that the congregation members made when the bell tower was refurbished, that is, like repaired and fixed up several years ago. Perhaps you yourself wrote a prayer on this rope, or a member of your family. So the rope is connected to those prayers, and so when the bell rings, well, the prayers are kind of connected to it. Well, let's take a trip here. So we started in the fellowship hall, kind of getting geared up. Then we started up into the tower. And look around, these old stones that would have been put there back in the late 1800s are over 150 years old. And there you see that metal object is the clapper, the original clapper for the bell. That's the metal piece that's inside the bell that makes it ring. And Kara told us that it's down there because it wore out. It rung the bell so many times that that clapper became flat on one side, and so they had to replace it about 30 years ago. But it's still there to remind us of all the times the bell has tolled over the years since that bell was first installed in 1871. Well, on up to the next level, we go up the ladder, and we're still not at the top. We're in this new room here. Look around. Look at those beautiful, huge timbers. Those must have come from some very large, very old trees. But once again, we weren't at the top, so we had still one more level to go. So we climbed this very narrow ladder, and there's Andre, having ascended the whole structure, popping his head through, and look around you. Look how beautiful it is up here. You can see so much of the city from here. There's this glorious bell, first set here in 1871, more than 150 years ago. You know, the bell was installed there just 7 years after a very, very famous poem and subsequent Christmas carol came out. It was called "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day," written by Henry Longfellow in 1864. Here are the first words of Henry's poem. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play. The wild and sweet, the words repeat, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And thought how, as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Men is the old language for all people. You know, if Christmas is just about beautiful carols and chiming bells, we really haven't captured the fullness of Christmas. Because our world is full of a lot of struggle as well. And of course, this year, we've been reminded of that a lot with the pandemic. All kinds of people hurting and struggling, losing their jobs and homes, or having to stay home from school and so forth. It hasn't been such a happy year. And so if Christmas is just about happiness and joy and singing bells, well, that kind of falls a little flat this year. Well, as it turns out, Henry's life had been very painful, and that made its way into his poem. You see, just 2 years earlier, his wife Her dress caught on fire, and in those days, dresses were like big and puffy and had lots of layers of fabric and were hard to both get on and take off. And that dress caught on fire, and she died from that fire. She died even though Henry threw himself on her, trying just to put out the flames with his own body. Can you even imagine the pain and sadness? Well, if that weren't enough, a month or so before he wrote his poem, one of Henry's 6 sons, who had signed up for the Union Army to help end slavery in the Civil War, he was shot by a Confederate bullet and was told he may not ever walk again. On Christmas Day in 1864, Henry was in the hospital helping to nurse his son back to health and feeling very down and gloomy. And outside, he heard sounds. What Henry heard were cannons from the Confederate Army firing at the city. And as the church bells were ringing out loudly, sounding that Christmas Day had come, they were being drowned out by the sounds of these ominous cannons. And he wrote about this in his poem, saying, "Then from each black accursed mouth," that's the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound the carols drowned of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It was as if an earthquake rent the hearthstones of a continent and made forlorn the households born of peace on earth, goodwill to men. In other words, the sounds of war were taking away the sounds and the hope for peace. But then something amazing happened. For reasons we don't quite know, the bells, the Christmas chimes, started chiming louder and louder all over the city, to the point where they actually drown out the sound of the cannons, lifting Henry's spirit and his hope with it. And he writes about his experience in the final line. "Then pealed the bells more loud and deep, God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men, goodwill to all people." I wonder how many sad souls have had their hopes lifted when they've heard our own church bell sound at Christmas time. Well, this year, like I say, we wanted to add to the joy and put some Christmas lights up there. But when we saw how faintly the lights were burning when we plugged them in, we weren't very sure that this was going to work. How could people possibly see these faintly burning lights from so far away? Well, we decided to put them all up anyway, and then come back to see what would happen. And you know what? It's amazing what happens when a whole bunch of tiny lights that faintly burn are all strung together. Our bell tower glowed with light, radiating light all over the city. So now this Christmas, people will not only hear the hopeful sounds of our Christmas bell chiming, but they will also be reminded of God's love that is the light of the world, that shines as brightly today as it ever did 2,000 years ago when Jesus was born. A light that the darkness cannot overcome, because the light is God's love that burns within you and me. And no matter how faintly it burns, when we come together and we join our hearts together, we too glow and radiate like that bell tower. Perhaps if more and more of us could join our little lights together, we could fulfill what the angels promised long ago: peace on earth and goodwill to all people.
Oh, prayer for the new year. I pray that we can find a way to come together. You know, I'm kind of over politics myself, so I'm just ready for us to all Can we all just get along here? I think I'm just ready to start reaching to people who I have seen as my enemy for the last 4 years, and just like, let's just try to figure out how to get through this. A little more compassion, a little less judgment on my part, probably. So that's mine.